My father signed power of attorney over to my brother because the lawyer said I wasn't business-minded enough. 18 months later, I'm the only one in this family who can read a bank statement without lying about what's in it. I'm Claire Bennett Hayes, 38, a hospital social worker outside Richmond. My father, Walter, is 76, 2 years into early-stage dementia, bad some days, sharp on others. My brother, Todd, 44, owns a logistics company that's been bleeding money for 3 years. He got power of attorney the week after Dad's diagnosis because our family attorney, Philip Voss, told everyone Todd had the head for it. I had the time for it instead. I visited twice a week. Todd visited when something needed signing. My father's second wife, Renata, married him 8 years ago, right when his portfolio was healthiest, and spent every year since repositioning herself as his primary decision-maker, especially once the diagnosis gave her cover to say Walter gets confused whenever he disagreed with her. I found the brokerage statement 2 weeks later, helping Dad sort medical bills of $41,000 liquidation, 4 months old, noted only as reallocation, per POA. Todd called it estate tax planning when I asked. I believed him until I called Dad's actual advisor, Diane Okafor, who'd managed his portfolio 15 years and had never processed it. Todd had moved the money through a different channel entirely, one she wasn't even authorized to see. Around the same time, my father's home health aide, Lupe Reyes, mentioned something that had been bothering her. Renata had been touring a memory care facility 2 states away, near her sister. Without telling Todd or me, Lupe had seen the brochure and overheard a call about getting everything finalized before the holidays. 2 schemes, running at once, neither aware of the other. Todd was draining accounts to cover his company's collapse. Renata was maneuvering to isolate my father near her sister, positioning herself as his only consistent contact before pushing a new will naming her sole beneficiary, one Todd didn't know existed, that would cut him out completely. I went to Voss next to find out who'd approved the reallocation. 5 years earlier, he'd informally invested $40,000 in Todd's company handshake deal, a promissory note kept in his own file. Never the firm's, never repaid. Once Todd had power of attorney, Voss started quietly approving his reallocations, because every withdrawal kept Todd's cash flow alive enough to repay him in small increments, off the books. Voss wasn't protecting our family. He was collecting a debt through my father's retirement account, 1 signature at a time, 3 people, 3 agendas. My father caught in the middle, lucid enough some days to understand exactly what was happening to him. I decided the only clean ending was getting all 3 to collide at once, in front of him, on a day I knew he'd be sharp. Lupe and I spent 6 weeks documenting his lucid windows mornings. After his medication settled, recording him discussing current events, recognizing people, answering financial questions correctly. Proof, for later, of exactly how aware he still was. Then, I went to Todd directly, framing it as something small, $4,500 for Dad's hearing aids. And could he walk me through how withdrawals worked, since I'd need to understand it eventually? Todd explained in too much detail, joking that Voss owes me anyway, so he doesn't ask many questions. He said it across his own kitchen table, while my phone recorded in my bag, legally. He'd confirmed the fraud and the conflict of interest in 1 sentence, in his own voice. A few days later, I had Lupe mention to Renata's sister Met during a facility tour that our family hadn't agreed to any transfer, and that Walter still had legal capacity per his physician. Renata's sister, uneasy, mentioned it back. Renata, panicked, called Voss to push the will signing forward immediately, not realizing he was already deep in Todd's scheme. Voss, juggling both fires, made notes in his own file notes that became discoverable the moment I requested his complete file through Diane's office, citing financial irregularities. I called a family meeting under the simplest reason, discussing Dad's care schedule. Todd came assuming it was routine. Renata came assuming her timeline was intact. Voss came because I'd told him Diane's office flagged some paperwork questions, and he wanted to control the room before I could ask anything unsupervised. I let my father sit at the head of the table, on a morning I knew, from 6 weeks of documentation, he'd be clear. I played Todd's recording first. That's taken out of context, Todd said immediately. You explained the entire process, Todd, in your own words, while telling me Voss doesn't ask questions because he owes you. Voss's face went somewhere between confused and cornered. I think we should discuss this privately. We can discuss the promissory note you kept out of your firm's file too, Philip. Diane's office already has a copy. You attached it by mistake to the same email where you approved last year's withdrawal. Renata, Sensing the room turning, tried to pivot to her own plan, the one she still thought nobody else knew about. Walter and I have already discussed moving closer to my family. Somewhere he can get more consistent care, Dad, I said. Did you agree to move to a facility near Renata's sister? My father looked at her, genuinely confused, not from his condition, but from being told something he'd never agreed to. Nobody asked me that. You toured it. Twice, with me, Renata said, composure slipping for the first time. I went to see her sister's garden. You told me that's what we were doing. That was the moment everyone in the room understood my father had been managed, not consulted, by at least 2 people who claimed to love him. I didn't need to say anything else. My father asked Voss directly whether he'd approved withdrawals Diane never authorized. Voss tried to soften it into an oversight. My father revoked Todd's power of attorney on the spot, verbally, in front of witnesses, and asked his physician's office that same afternoon to formally document his capacity to do so, closing the exact loophole Renata had been counting on. What happened after wasn't instant, but it was complete. Diane's office froze further disbursements pending audit. Todd's logistics company, already underwater, lost its last informal lifeline, once Voss facing a bar complaint and a documented conflict of interest stopped covering for him to save himself first. Voss surrendered the file voluntarily, hoping it would look better later. It didn't stop the complaint. Renata, with no will signed, no facility transfer, and a husband who now clearly remembered she'd misrepresented their agreement, left the house within the month. She didn't get the inheritance she'd spent 8 years building toward, and she didn't get to control the version of events Lupe had already documented. My father named me his new agent under a fresh power of attorney 3 weeks later, with a different attorney entirely, one Diane personally recommended. Not because I asked for it, because I was the only person in that room who hadn't been trying to get something out of him. Todd still calls sometimes. Renata doesn't. Voss is currently the subject of a state bar inquiry that Diane's office helped initiate. Nobody ever thought I was business-minded enough to be dangerous. That was always the part they got wrong.